Today is Friday, September 19th, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. Jimmy Kimmel is off the air indefinitely after controversial Charlie Kirk comments. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. You can email your thoughts as well. quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. Joining me today to get through the news of the craze. We do each and every weekday here, bright and early. CBN's Billy Hallowell and Trey Goins-Phillips. Guys, a lot to get to as always. On the focus story, Billy, we've got a representative that thinks Donald Trump should be getting a pretty big award.
Yeah, this is interesting. This particular member of Congress, Marlin Stutzman, he believes the Nobel Peace Prize should go to President Trump. So we'll break down what he had to say to us about that.
All right, details on that coming up. On the main thing as well, conspiracy theories are swirling online after Charlie Kirk's assassination. Some are targeting Israel with some pretty baseless claims. We'll cover that and more on the main thing. All right, make sure you subscribe to all of our CBN News podcasts. Also, our FaithWire Substack, faithwire.substack.com. We're praying through the news of the day. Obviously, right now, more than ever, we really need prayers given what's transpired here in the last couple weeks. faithwire.substack.com. And with that, we're going to go to the news in 90 seconds. And Jimmy Kimmel's late night future is in serious doubt. ABC has suspended his show indefinitely after comments he made about Charlie Kirk's assassination. More than 60 ABC affiliates say they won't air the program, with Nexstar and Sinclair leading the charge. Kimmel claimed Trump supporters were trying to score political points from Kirk's death. That drew the ire of FCC Chairman Brendan Carr, who accused Kimmel of misleading viewers about the shooter's politics, because Kimmel also claimed that Tyler Robinson was basically MAGA, and he didn't back down from that claim, even though it's clearly incorrect. President Trump cheered on the suspension, calling Kimmel untalented, while affiliates are demanding an apology, even a donation to Turning Point USA. And the U.S. Senate has unanimously approved a resolution designating October 14th, 2025 as the National Day of Remembrance for Charlie Kirk. The measure, introduced by Senator Rick Scott of Florida, praises Kirk as a champion of free speech, faith, individual liberty, and youth leadership. It also highlights his founding of Turning Point USA and his work to promote civic engagement across constitutional principle. Those are just some of today's top headlines. Check out more stories of everything going on right now in the U.S. and the world at cbnnews.com. The big talk right now, guys, is this Jimmy Kimmel suspension. He has not been fired, contrary to what people have said. We'll see if he comes back on. It's definitely on the balance as far as his future, but right now the terminology that's being thrown around as to what actually has happened to the show is that he's being preempted indefinitely. So we'll see where that lands, but there's a lot of talk right now, people talking about hypocrisy from Trump and others on the right saying, oh, I thought you guys were the free speech people. But I think there's a difference here, guys, in free speech, which Jimmy Kimmel's allowed to say the things he wants. But when you upset, it's a business. So if you upset dozens and dozens of your affiliates that are carrying your program, and it's content that they think is damaging to their brand, they have every right to turn around and say, we're not airing this. That is not a free speech issue. This is not the FCC just saying, you know what, this guy's kind of liberal, we got to shut him down. That is not at all what happened here.
It appears that Sinclair, the company involved in, that basically runs the channels where the show airs, there's a series of things that they reportedly want to see happen if they do bring the show back, which I think is interesting. And one of those was, a meaningful donation to Kirk's family or his organization. This is according to Business Insider. Direct apology and also some other steps that they want them to take. So that's if the show were to ever come back. It is, to your point, Dan, complicated, because part of the free speech argument we've had in this country has been for companies and small businesses to also have the right to do what they want to do. So does a baker have to make the cake? No, right? These are some of the battles that conservatives have fought. It's not a direct free speech issue because, it is when it comes to the businesses, you have an employer that wants, perhaps people under them to reflect values that they agree with. So it does get complicated.
Yeah. I mean, and sometimes speech has consequences though. So that's the difference. Like you have to actually evaluate the speech and say, is this reasonable speech that's of a belief and not offensive, et cetera, et cetera. But that's protected speech. But if I just sit around and I say things that are obviously terrible and it's damaging to my company, well, they have every right to fire me. So, and like if I went around on tirades all day online and I started calling people names and everything, and CBN said, hey, what are you doing here? I think they have the right to fire me. I'm still able to say the things I want, but sometimes you might not be able to keep your job because of it, I guess. But you're right. Like you can't just take that lightly. You do have to say, wait a minute, is this speech that we can't fire them over? But I think in the case of Jimmy Kimmel, it sure looks like just a business decision and not like you can't say this.
Look, I think it's fine, and I think it's appropriate to pause and to examine a free speech issue, because I think free speech is tantamount to a free society. I think that's the bedrock, one of the bedrocks of our existence as a country. But at the end of the day, this specifically, the Jimmy Kimmel situation, seems like an ROI issue. There's not a return on investment for ABC and for Disney. And part of me thinks, honestly, that they saw Stephen Colbert, his show, getting axed, and they're like, can we find a reason? Because this is costing us millions of dollars, and we're pouring millions of dollars into all of these salaries, and we're not even breaking even here. So can we find a way to get this show off the air? Again, like you said, Dan, it's important to note that he hasn't been fired. The show has not been canceled, but it has been suspended indefinitely, I believe is the word that ABC and Disney use. So we'll see ultimately what happens. And the one last thing that I'll say as far as this free speech argument goes, and this is an attack against Jimmy Kimmel's right to free speech, is I think the left would have a much easier time making that argument if all of the left, all of the media, all of celebrities, all of these late night shows hadn't been spending the last 8, 9, 10 years consistently bashing President Trump, then candidate Trump, for all of that time, right? And they've been free to do it. MSNBC is still on the air, and as far as I know, I don't know if anybody's watching it, but they're still producing programming that's going out. So I think it's kind of difficult to make this is an attack on free speech argument when no celebrity really has been stopped from saying what they want to say.
Right. And it's complete. Well, I just want to say, adding to Trey's point, it's completely different when it comes directly from President Trump. Now, I know he's weighing in and commenting, exactly, but that is not what sparked this suspension. It was the affiliates who were mad at the product that was being over there because they felt it was harming their brands. It wasn't everyone was happy and President Trump came in and said, shut it down. It wasn't that at all. So those are people trying to spread the narrative that, oh, Trump is just censoring everything he doesn't like. To your point, Trey, Trump wouldn't have enough censors in the world to stop all of the Trump critics that are out there on the media. It's just not be possible. And like you said, MSNBC would be the first one to be shut down. That hasn't happened yet. So, sorry, go ahead, Billy.
Yeah, my last comment on this, it's very fascinating to watch people who have dominated every single orifice of media, Hollywood, universities for decades now. Suddenly, when they're on the losing side, it's a panic. It is. I think it would be important to be a little introspective, that maybe excluding conservatives and Christians and others and mocking them and putting them down for decades and eons, that they've had that power. Now is a moment to maybe say, hey, maybe we need to come back to a middle ground, and maybe comedy should just be comedy and not a political lecture every single night on every channel for the entirety of time.
Right. And we're all old enough to have lived through COVID. And I'm pretty sure these news organizations saw the reports. Maybe they even wrote some themselves of the Biden administration directly pressuring Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all of these major social media platforms to stop quote unquote disinformation. They were actively censoring things all over social media everywhere. And it seems to me that most of these same people complaining now, we're all on board with the disinformation team from the government censors from the disinformation team. So it's...
And can I say one more thing, Dan? And that's just, I have seen some people who are bolder about calling out how dangerous it is that Jimmy Kimmel is off the air
Yeah.
more bold about that than they were about Charlie Kirk being
100%.
assassinated. And that is disgusting.
That is disgusting. And it's like if Chris Hayes, I mean, we don't usually name names, but Chris Hayes is probably the one that's been most dramatic from MSNBC that I've seen about this. And it's like, why is this the thing that appalls you seemingly more than the assassination itself? That is a troubling question. And maybe I just don't watch enough Chris Hayes and I missed his emotional tribute on Charlie Kirk get shared around, but somehow I would have seen it, I think, if a liberal host on MSNBC did that. But yeah, that's a great point there. And we could probably talk, will probably be talked about for definitely more days to come. And I'm sure we'll weigh in on it again, but we got to get moving here on with the podcast. And we're going to go to that focus story now on the Republican congressman who nominated President Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize, explaining why he believes the president deserves it. So what's the story here?
Yeah, this is Representative Marlin Stutzman from Indiana. We sat down with him at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. when CBN held the Revival Generation documentary premiere recently. And, one of the things we talked about was why he nominated the president. And he talked about a lot of the things that Trump has done in the past, trying to bridge divides with North Korea, efforts towards diplomacy and different conversations with world leaders. He said President Trump knows how to bring people together. And one of the things that I saw over the past several months is how he handled the situation with Iran and with Israel. He really just kind of went into detail on the different places where we've seen Trump have an impact. Now, that doesn't mean those wars have ended. They're still ongoing in many of those locations, or some of them rather. But to his point, the president has at the very least been able to bring people in a room, like meeting with the head of North Korea, with Kim Jong-un. These are things that we have not seen before. And so he felt they qualified Trump for the Nobel.
And what did he say just about the Middle East in general?
Yeah, so he brought up Iran and Israel. And he said, here you have a country that's attacking one of our strongest allies in the Middle East. And he was talking about Israel, obviously being the victim there. And President Trump makes a decision not to go to war, but to take out their threat of a nuclear bomb. He was talking about Trump's response, which obviously there's still debate and discussion about surrounding how the president responded. But the point is the tensions with Iran were brought down pretty quickly. I mean, they're still there, but it's not what it was at the height of that. And so, the Middle East, he also talked about the Abraham Accords. Obviously, that's been a huge success for Trump during his first term. He said, they're bringing together countries and focusing on commerce rather than on shooting at one another, which I thought was a funny way to put what's going on in the Middle East. But he said, that there are still other situations ongoing there, of course, that need to be addressed, but felt he was very effective in those arenas.
Also, he spoke about revival in America. So what did he have to say there?
Yeah, so he was there to obviously talk about the Revival Generation. This is CBN's film that explores the moves of God that we're seeing on college campuses across America. He talked about the positive faith trajectory that he sees happening in culture, people moving, especially young people, closer to God. Also said that he feels some of that is coming from a 30,000-foot level, just the tone that's been set in government. Not that government is making that happen, but that there's just a realignment going on in the culture and even politically. And he said, at the end of the day, every one of us as human beings, we want to know what is truth because that creates stability in our lives. There's nothing more securing to me as an individual to know what I believe. He believes young people are finding that increasingly in our current chaotic and tattered culture.
This is one of those areas that President Trump does not get virtually any credit on. And you just think that that's a bias that's leaking through that people are unable to look through, even as something as universally generally praised as the Abraham Accords. The efforts that he's had there. And listen, for all of President Trump's complaints that people have against him, he certainly does have a knack at talking to people and bringing them together, as you mentioned earlier. I mean, that is certainly one of his better qualities, and he's definitely strong at that. And I think there have been, despite all of the challenges that the globe is facing right now, President Trump definitely has been a positive force for trying to stop wars that are going on and to stop ones that could be potentially sparked in the future.
Well, something that's interesting, I think, about Trump is, generally speaking, I think the assumption in Washington, D.C., and even the perspective that most Americans have is it's a place where nothing gets done, right? When a Democrat is in office or another Republican other than Trump is in office, we often hear like, well, things take a long time to get done. You might not see any sort of fruit from the labor here. It's going to take a long time, whatever. Trump, for all of his maybe not so glowing qualities, he is a person of action. I mean, he's able to bring people, as you said, Dan, to the table, and he actually gets results. Now, it might not always be depending on your political persuasion. It might not always be something you want to get done, but I do want to give Trump credit for being somebody who not only does bring people to the table for conversations, but he is actually able to successfully move the needle on things, which is impressive in a world that is, I think, so often brought to a halt by just political gridlock.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, it's certainly something we're going to continue to watch because we have all these things happening at home, and we cannot lose sight about the interactions we have with all the different varying nations around the globe. And we're going to certainly keep tabs on how President Trump is doing with that. So appreciate the update here on that today, Billy. And we're going to head to the main thing now. And as I mentioned earlier, there are some dangerous lies popping up right now that somehow the Jews are to blame, or Israel is to blame, for the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Unbelievable stuff coming out. And to help us unpack and debunk these conspiracies, CBN's Raj Nair sat down with Shimon Myers, the CEO of ARISE, for today's main thing.
So, Shimon, what do you make of these conspiracies?
Not a whole lot, to be honest with you. I would like to just first of all, as an Israeli, someone of Jewish descent, and also as an American, express my deep sorrow over the passing of Charlie Kirk. He was a true friend, a friend of Israel and a friend of Judeo-Christian values, and, had so much respect and still do for Charlie. I think it's a good time to focus on what we do know, which is that Charlie Kirk was an outspoken friend of Israel until the day he died. And yes, he had some criticisms for Israel, just as so many others do. His were probably minor in comparison. But one of the nice things about Israel is, even as an Israeli citizen, someone residing in Israel, you can openly criticize Israel. There's freedom of speech in Israel, and so you can do that. But I want to just think about what we do know about Israel. So we know that Charlie Kirk was a friend of Israel, outspoken supporter of Israel. And in looking at the global response to Charlie's passing, I think if you do a broad sweep of statements from across the world, you'd find probably significant lacking response in terms of expressing sorrow from the Middle East, with the exception of one small beacon of light, when our prime minister, our president in Israel, our foreign minister, former foreign minister Gideon Sa'ar, and so many others have come out and expressed deep sorrow over Israel's dear friend, Charlie Kirk, to the degree that, to the best of my knowledge, the first mural commemorating Charlie Kirk was painted on a wall in Israel. There is a square in Netanya, one of Israel's great cities, that is being named after Charlie Kirk. And that's in the state of Israel. And it would be my guess that across the entire Middle East, you've heard crickets, other than the state of Israel, that is deeply sorrowful over the passing of Charlie Kirk.
So where do these come from? Why is it always, this obviously isn't new. This has been happening for 4,000 years, where there's something, in the world, and let's blame the Jews. But where does this come from? It's prevalent. I wish it was just a fringe element, but I'm getting texts from all sorts of normal level-headed people sending me this podcast and this Instagram reel and saying, well, how do you respond to this? Obviously, Israel did it somehow. How should people be processing this? How should they respond to this avalanche of content that's saying Israel, for some reason, killed one of its greatest defenders because in the past week or so, he had different opinions? I'm like, okay, well then why are all these other people that are way more vocal totally fine? Anyway, how would you respond to that?
Yeah, I would try to respond to it. I won't be able to do justice to Charlie Kirk's skill set, but I would try to respond to it with critical thinking. you know, Charlie Kirk was an unquestionable friend of Israel and very outspoken in his support for Israel, the biblical perspective on Israel, his personal biblical perspective on Israel, the right of Israel to exist, et cetera, et cetera. And he, of course, he, like me, didn't think that everything that Israel does or has done is always perfect, right? And that's perfectly fine to feel that way. So we know that he was outspoken on behalf of Israel. We also know that he was outspoken and has been more and more outspoken in his critique of the advance of Islam across the globe, and also the fact that Islam is not compatible with Western civilization. He debated it and he proclaimed it openly. And if you want to hear where he was getting more and more vocal, it was on this subject. And the reason for that is because of the global expanse of it. And you can see it right here in our own country, right here in the United States of America. Go visit Dearborn, Michigan. Go visit some of these places where, you know, people are trying to implement Sharia law. And he adamantly declared that Sharia law should be banned in Western civilization, in Western countries. And so in just putting on our critical thinking cap, let's just look at the bigger picture. Let's just step back for a minute from all the conspiracy theories and all of these accusations that are flying and look at the big picture. And he also stood for a word that many of these people hate, which is Judeo-Christian values. And the bottom line is, yes, there are differences between Israel and the United States, but there is a shared value system called Judeo-Christian values, which is the beating heart and the foundation on which Western civilization was founded and stands. And Charlie Kirk believed that, and he fought for it, and he talked about it. And, you know, the enemies of that are really who he was most vocal against. If he were to be outspoken against somebody, it was the enemies of that way of life. It would make more sense. It would stand to reason that if there was any foreign actor involved, which we don't know that. We don't know that there was any entity other than a troubled youth that was involved. We don't know. Maybe there were, maybe there wasn't. But if there was, it would stand to reason to me that it wouldn't be somebody that he was speaking out on behalf of, but rather somebody that he was speaking out against.
Well, Senator Ted Cruz just tweeted an interesting tweet about this. He said, basically responding to people like Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, the list goes on. He says, quote, "I'm getting really tired of Tucker and his cronies falsely claiming Charlie agreed with me that Israel is terrible and the problem in America is all the Jews. I knew Charlie well, and indeed the very last conversation we had was how deeply concerned he was about the rising toxic wave of anti-Semitism on the right." And to me, this obsession with blaming the Jewish people, there's been a lot of Jewish blood spilled over the centuries, over the millennium, because it was the Jews' fault. And I get it. Like I understand that conspiracy theories scratch some deep itch inside of us that can blame someone else. But when over and over and over and over again throughout the centuries, these libels that have obviously been proven to be false in the Middle Ages and Nazi Germany results in the death and eventually extermination in a lot of cases of the Jewish people. In certain pockets of the world, pogroms and inquisitions and whatever. It seems to be a pattern. But maybe, Shimon, in closing, okay, so when there is these pretty convincing, I guess you could call it, theories online, if you go down the rabbit trails, how should we initially be viewing this kind of onslaught that social media is pushing on us? Yeah, just your wisdom and discernment. Obviously, we're both followers of Jesus, followers of Yeshua. I just want to know how you think we should be handling this algorithm that's pushing all of these things right in front of our faces.
I think, again, we should take a page out of Charlie Kirk's book and use critical thinking and observation skills. And for those of you that are listening and watching, you have every right to whatever conspiracy theory you want. But I challenge you to find anyone in your community, in your city, in your state that's trying to impose Jewish or Israeli law on you, that's trying to take away your freedoms and tell you how to dress in the name of Judaism or Israel. There isn't anybody. Charlie Kirk knew that. Charlie Kirk knew who his friends were, who on the planet shared his value system and who did not. And he was outspoken on behalf of Israel and the Jewish people. And he was also equally outspoken on, who it is that's in our countries and in our states and in our communities that is not committed to freedom, that's committed and actively trying to take our freedoms away, trying to tell you here in America how you have to dress, what you can wear, what freedoms you should have, whatever your sexual orientation should be, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not the Jewish people. It's not Israel. And Charlie Kirk knew that. He spoke out about it. And I think that's how we should be looking at this and thinking about it. And I also think we should just be very practical and let the evidence come out on exactly what's behind this. There is no evidence. I have not been presented with any evidence whatsoever that gives any indication of foreign involvement in this. Doesn't mean that it didn't happen, but let's let that evidence speak for itself as it comes out, not jump to conclusions, not be quick to pointing fingers, not spread more hatred. Let's just take a minute and pause.
All right, Raj, appreciate that conversation there. Sadly, it's one we actually have to have. Even Benjamin Netanyahu had to release a statement talking about Charlie Kirk on this front. Really sad and unfortunate. All right, that's going to leave us with time on the podcast this week for one last thing.
We've got Psalm 102:17. He will respond to the prayer of the destitute. He will not despise their plea. When we're struggling, when we're suffering, we can turn to him in our times of need, and he will hear our prayer.
As a country, we're grappling with a lot of difficult things right now, and it's a good reminder that prayer is always powerful and a good first response in any situation.
Amen. All right, great spot to leave it there. A great thought to leave it with on this Friday edition of the Quick Start Podcast. As always, make sure you're getting on over to cbnnews.com and faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. Lord willing, and that creek don't rise up on us. We'll be back here on Monday with more. God bless. We'll see you then. Have a great weekend.